Yeah, and ever since then, it's just been a thing. But even like throughout elementary and junior high and high school, it's a thing
Yeah.
among everybody. And then adulthood, it's
But it's like you said, it's so appropriate for so many occasions. It's just, and it's funny because I don't think there's anything that's really, kind of taken its place of effectiveness. It's just so ideal, you know?
yeah,
It's very common out of my mouth. I can't help it.
it's a go-to. And like recently, I used the term "fuck stick," which I've never used in a sentence. It just came out in a tweet, and
That's
here we
pretty
are.
good.
Yeah.
Well, what is? Do you remember James Lipton inside the actors studio? You remember one of the questions he would ask all the actors is, "What's your favorite curse word?" My favorite one was Clint Eastwood. And I'll
Uh-oh.
make sure I get this right because he says to Lipton, it's uh, Jamf, Jamf, and of course Lipton's, what does that mean? And Clint Eastwood's like, jive ass motherfucker. I'm like, oh, that's the best answer ever. Well, I'm getting some weird sunlight. I'm scooting over. But
um,
yeah, that's like I wish I could find times that would be really appropriate because I've never used it in like just normal conversation. So
yeah,
sometime we can all
I,
dream.
I feel like that's kind of like maybe evolved to BAMF, which I haven't heard in years either, which is
Is that
badass
big?
motherfucker.
Badass? Yeah. I was almost gonna say bitch ass motherfucker,
That
but I'm
works
like, wait,
too.
that does, and I guess depending on who you're talking to, who the audience is.
Yeah, it's all about the situation and the context. Uh,
Precisely. Yeah.
but all right, well, let's have you introduce yourself so we could put a voice to the face and a face to the
Sure.
voice.
Yeah, I'm Michael Klug. I live in LA, and I'm mainly a screenwriter, but I also I'm a film critic and an actor as well, but mostly screenwriting. Yeah.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah, it always sounds so ridiculous to me to say triple threat. But like, I guess, if you're going to be a douche about it, why not use that term? I'm a triple threat, but I guess it goes, if you're a dancer, singer, actor, that maybe works better because I don't know. I'm not going to use that term. I'm just saying it could be applicable, right?
I think it goes hand in hand because I myself, I am a writer. I
Right.
haven't like sold anything, but I definitely write screenplays and I also do film criticism on the side.
Okay.
And I don't act, but they all go hand in hand, essentially.
Oh, for sure. I did. I was a film critic for about 5 years. I mean, I still do it here and there. I'll, pop something out if someone asks, and I'm like, fine. But I was doing it literally like 10 reviews a month for 4.5 years. And, but it was something that was so interesting how much it influenced my own screenwriting, because you saw a lot of do not do this, a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think what I counted once was that in that 4.5 years, I wrote about 400 reviews. So I'm like, I watched a lot of crap. God bless those filmmakers. They're trying, but it's like I learned a lot from seeing bad movies, and certainly was inspired by some of the good ones too. So so it was helpful in my own writing. I certainly credit that.
Yeah. And just for context for the listeners or viewers if they're watching this, is you and I mutually know each other now.
Yes.
Through Taylor Deuce, who was on a previous episode.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And he has one of my favorite quotes that he often uses is like, it's a miracle that things ever get made anyways. And so even the bad films, it's always like, well, you made something, so like it's also an applause.
Yes, but this is what his, pardon this tangent because geez Louise, I one of the things that drove me crazy because I do know how difficult it is to get something made, even if you're doing a low budget, kind of self-produced situation.
Yeah.
But then have a script that works. And what slays me is that you see some of these films that I reviewed over the years that it looks pretty good. You know, they had some money behind it and maybe they got a couple of good actors, but your script sucks, man. So why go through all that trouble when you can't succeed without a good script? You can't. So you look pretty, but there's no substance. And that's something that I feel like I was a broken record in my reviews frequently. Like, you know, just work on the script. You know, I had someone tell me once that they knew somebody that shot their first draft. I I don't get it. I don't get it. You know, you're not doing yourself a service, especially with all the work you're going to put in, you know?
Yeah, that gives me anxiety just because even with like first drafts, I have a select group of people all send like the first draft too, you know, because
Yeah.
they understand it's the shitty draft essentially.
Yeah.
But even then, like if you go through like 7 drafts, even it's still going to change throughout filming and throughout
Sure.
editing. Like it's not going to
Absolutely.
be the final product ever. But like you said, the more defined the script is, the better of a blueprint you have to work with.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing. And it's like I don't think I let anybody in generally until probably the third draft.
Yeah.
Because I've realized lately over my past few scripts that the first draft, I mean, you know, they call it the vomit draft. Of course, that's what it is. But mine are not even fit for human consumption at that point. It's like, no. And the thing is, I know a lot of my scripts. It's like, I know what has to happen in the climax to get me to the ending that I've written. But I generally call the first draft done before the climax is even there. I'm like, I know this and this needs to happen, but I don't know what I want to do yet. But you know, let's go ahead and register it. It's done. Because you know, it's a good milestone, of course, and a good, you know, cheering yourself on. But yeah, half the time my frequent scripts are like, what happens here? I don't know. Something. Stuff.
Yeah, it's always fun when you're doing table reads and the writer puts in like, I don't have this written yet, but like, just imagine this happens because it's going to go to this part, and then like it just
Yeah.
automatically cuts to the next part. I actually kind of love
Well,
that because it's
I
fun.
do my table reads, you know, for that. It's again that kind of milestone, but
Yeah,
also, you know, you hear it out loud what doesn't work. But it's like, no, I'm that's usually like a fourth draft before I get someone in, you know, people to sit down and read it because I would not, like I said, no one would see that first draft. I can't imagine having big old blanks in there to be like, okay, let me make excuses here. It's like, you know, that yeah, it's such an interesting process, you know, and I adore it, but yeah, it's I'll jump the gun frequently. First draft's done. Is it done? No, but it's done.
yeah. Would you ever shoot a first draft of yours, just to show how messy it is
Oh God, you talk
while
about
you're shooting?
anxiety. No, no. I mean, it's no. I mean, I guess if you had a lot of money to do it as an experiment, that'd be kind of interesting. Like, how does this come out based on what you've done thus far? But oh man, anxiety. That's not a pleasant thought. Like, how terrible would that be? But that's the thing. It's like I'm trying to figure out if I saw that movie that was made out of a first draft because some of them certainly looked like that could have been the case.
Yeah, it's just anxiety. I don't know. I love writing, but like first drafts are rough. But
Yeah.
it sucks too. For me personally, I have a hard, like I'm very perfectionist, like OCD,
Mm. Yeah.
and if I don't feel like it's going anywhere, I'll just stop writing. Period. And then I'll come back to it like months later, and I'm like, I still don't know. And like it creates the block essentially, like not
Well,
writing.
blocks are so weird to me. Like I have them and I will still try to plow through because I've
Mm,
had too many examples of the this is 4 pages of garbage, but wow, there's one bit of dialogue that wow, this could get a whole scene out of it or a character move or something, you know. So it's like I try to always stay with that positivity, like, okay, these 4 pages will never be in the final product, but this found this little thing just by sitting here plucking through crap, you know. So I always try to like, okay, there, who knows what you might find. So yeah, those blocks are terrible, and you know you're writing crap, but it's like, well,
yeah. Well, and like going on that, like there's been scripts where I'll write like 20 pages of like a scene, and
yeah,
then like you have this revelation of like this is not going to be in the final script at all, delete everything but keep those lines of dialogue, or just change characters around, and like it starts. I don't know. When the puzzle starts fitting together and you start seeing it in your head, it's such a wonderful feeling.
Well, do you outline? Do you do any pre-work treatments or anything?
Okay, well, here's the thing. I used to not to. I don't know how I got stuff done. I it's a miracle I even got like a whole first draft done by not doing that. But now I'm finding myself running into the roadblock of like, oh shit, like I need to get to the spot somehow. I don't know, because like it seems so convoluted essentially. And I'm like, if I had, done a treatment or an outline of some sort, it would have been easier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been hired to do treatments, and I've had to do projects that, I've been hired to do that. Obviously you're going off of a treatment and you're helping to create that, and then you'll move into the full Monty. But I don't do it for my own work. I really never have. And because I am such a train of thought writer, and this is such a stupid writer comment, but I've said it, is like, the characters need to tell me what they want to do.
Exactly. No,
you get them into a position. It's like, okay, what are you going to do to get out of this? And I love that. And then I feel like it's sort of non-creative to really plan it out. I mean, take notes and brainstorm and so you can remember things, but I get in there and just like, okay, let's see what happens, and that's how I figure out who the people are, and like I said, even in those scenarios, it's like, well, okay, now this is introduced here. Like the one I'm working on now, it's like, oh, I didn't see her as a mother figure, but oh, she's gonna be, it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. It's like, you're typing like, oh, makes sense. So I don't do it. It doesn't work for me. And so for hired gigs, it is kind of a weird, all right, let me, turn my brain off and do it over here on the other side of my brain, because it's, not the way I work. I mean, I don't think it's a non-creative process, but it isn't the way I work. It just doesn't.
No, and it's not how I work either. And the last episode, Cody presented to me that it's called the story clock, which is essentially it's like a clock, and you have like the 12 o'clock, the 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock,
Yeah.
And basically he said that like if an event happens over here on this side, you could symmetry like over here and bring it back into the story.
Okay.
And oh my God, like that would work perfect for comedy, like especially like if you want to bring back a gag.
Sure. Yeah.
And his big thing with that was like payoff. I'm like, there's so many times I forgot about payoff until I reread the script.
Yeah. Well, I don't, because you see a lot of those, I'm sure as a writer, you get all those spams or pseudo spams of, story structure and, beat sheets. And I guess Save the Cat as an example. I'm not familiar with that, but I don't do 3-act structure. Like somehow everything comes out and it's a nice progression and it works, but I don't do that. And any of those things you see software, it's like that helps you plot. I'm like, then what do you write? Why? That's your job. I mean, how are you, and so I always find it organically. I mean, but I find that my workload on subsequent drafts is certainly probably heavier because, you are writing from your brain completely. So, well, clearly I got to go back and fix this. And perhaps if you'd outlined or done a treatment, that you might have not had those roadblocks, but I'm so used to that process. I'm like, okay, that's just how I write. That's it,
Yeah. So do you mind me asking, what kind of scripts are you more geared toward writing? Like
horror.
What's your horror scripts?
Yeah.
So have you had like the satisfaction of like when a character dies and you just sit back and you're like, oh, that was beautiful.
Yes. Actually, there was the one I finished last year. It was a piece called Mom Died. It's a zombie film, but that's basically incidental. It is a family drama, but they get trapped inside a mortuary, but there is a lot of animosity between the siblings. So there was a moment in that one that when I wrote it, I'm like, ouch. But it felt great, and I didn't dislike the character, but everybody else did. The characters all did, and I thought she was pretty nifty. I liked her, but there was some pleasure in letting her go, not because I disliked her, but because that was pretty clever. But yeah, but there's also on that note, I'm sure for you too, it's like, I don't feel comfortable killing this person, And in horror, that's what the game is, pretty much, you know?
Yeah. Well, and, like it's like I love the movies that have these huge I mean, like look at have you've seen The Departed, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, actually, just last year.
Yes. That's my favorite Scorsese flick. But like the ending in the elevator shaft, essentially, like when out of nowhere, like this guy that we're following just gets shot and he's dead. Like that's the
Yeah,
end of his story.
yeah.
And
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, not just like imagining being like the writer for that, like letting him go in that way. But there's like a epic payoff with like the last sequence, essentially, you know, like somebody we totally forgot. Like it's such a beautiful transition.
But that's what something I love about when you're structuring things is like if you can make something like that work, then you're a god.
Yeah.
Because one, it's outside of the norm. Two, you know, people aren't necessarily going to buy into it because it's out of place. But you know, if you can make it work and make it smooth, I think that's such a gift to play with structure and expectations, you know. I don't necessarily succeed on that on my level, but you know, when people do it, it's like that's pretty nifty. I'm scooting again. My sunlight is shifting. So anyway, there you go.
Oh no, you're good. All right, Michael, let's start from the beginning. Like what got you interested in movies and how long have you been at it?
Um, I kind of always look. I mean, I've liked movies since forever, but I think the thing that kind of started my path was I'm a huge Romero fan. Like George Romero is my guy. He has been for years. I was devastated when he died. But Creepshow was probably my first introduction to true horror, even though it's kind of comedy. But it terrified me. It devastated me. But that's where I think it all started because my forte are zombie stories, and Romero's zombie films were certainly big inspirations for me. But yeah, I mean, it was very early. I wrote my first short story called House of the Dead when I was 10 years old. You know, obviously inspired by Creepshow, and um, yeah, since then that's just been. You know, I go outside of there. I just finished up a boxing comedy with a buddy of mine. We worked on it together this year. But otherwise, it's horror for the most part. Somehow it always creeps in. Even if I start with an idea like, oh, this could be nice, it's like somehow it turns dark every time. So yeah,
Well, it's interesting you brought up comedy, because I feel like there's a lot of horror fans that are comedy fans and vice versa.
yeah,
And I think it's so subjective, and
yeah,
they both kind of blend well, especially if you do it well. Like I mean, if you look at movies like Cabin in the Woods, right?
yeah,
Like it blends so well and works essentially perfectly, I would say. But
yeah.
um, so I'm not surprised that you dabbled into comedy because I feel like
Well, I
every
mean, I don't know who it was. Somebody I saw an interview or something. It's like you basically have to hit the same beats as horror and in comedy. You know, you
yeah.
set up the joke, here's the payoff. You set up the suspense, here's the payoff. So I guess it's kind of that similar structure, but I mean, they're both such intense releases, you know, as far as what your experience. So, but yeah, horror comedies are they're hard, and I think it's really hard to get right. I mean, you mentioned Cabin in the Woods. I always go to Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead's
Um,
perfect. Yeah.
you know, it's like those in my mind are pretty, like you said, near perfect. So it's always frightening to me when somebody tries to do it, and you see pretty quickly it's like, yeah, you're not gonna ride that line, and you're gonna fail, and you can see it pretty quickly when you're watching a movie. It's like it's supposed to be funny, and you don't get the horror right, or it's scary, but your jokes are flat, and but it's an interesting thing to watch, kind of a train wreck if they don't get it right, but it's hard.
Did you like Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead? Since you brought up Romero.
It's in my top 40 of all time. I mean, the original's miles ahead of it, but I loved it. I was actually when I first saw it legitimately upset because those first 10 minutes it was too much for me to handle. But I'm also terrified of zombies, so it hit hard. It really did. I love it. Do you like that one?
I do. I saw that in the drive-in with my dad. Um, I was maybe like third grade,
Oh Lord, man, that's tough.
but Well, I mean, let me set it up. So it was a double feature of Finding Nemo and that. I know.
What is that?
I have no idea. But my dad was just like, okay, well, this is an adult movie, so go to sleep. Like, like whatever. And so
Famous last words, yeah.
and I remember pressing the sheet or blanket or whatever, like, close to my face and like watching these zombies essentially.
Ooh.
And yeah, dude, it terrified me to say the least. But I like that movie.
I can't imagine seeing it at third grade. I saw it when I was 30 because it was released, 16 years ago. I was 30. And I remember we went to opening night and those first 10 minutes, you know how intense those are. And they're I was on the verge of a legitimate panic attack. If they had kind of continued at that pace and that intensity before they cut to the credits and the Johnny Cash song, I would have had to leave. I'm like, I can't deal with this. I was very upset. But again, zombies scare the shit out of me. Obviously they're not real, but they're scary to me. And I mean, even because after Creepshow and then Day of the Dead was kind of the real intro, I had zombie nightmares from the night I saw that film, and I still have very intense, very vivid zombie nightmares, and they're very upsetting, So obviously that's what has informed me, but that's no joke for my fears.
When that intro too, was 5 minutes long, maybe, if even.
Yeah.
It starts at a 1, and just looking back on it, it right as it starts, it slowly starts escalating to a 10. Yeah. And keeps at that, and then, like you said, cuts their credits.
But that's the thing, though. Even that first, just the music cue, and I think the Strike Company logo comes up. The moment you get in there, Snyder really did a good job, because the moment you set foot in, Sarah Polley's Anna's world, this is not good. This is not going to be good, and then the other nurse is like, oh, the guy's up in the ICU from a bite. It's like, oh, this is not going to. And that's within the first minute. So, and like you said, from there, it just goes up and up and up, and it doesn't let up.
Yeah, it's like a heartbeat, essentially, and then right as the credits hit, that's when it kind of flatlines. And then we start into this whole world of zombies. And I really appreciate Snyder's approach using practical effects over his well-known CGI now, but there was a lot of stuff that went into it, where they would age the blood to show the darker the blood was, the older the zombie was.
The zombies were, yeah.
And I love that, and watching the behind the scenes stuff of that. I think it was in 5th grade when I watched the behind the scenes stuff, at a friend's sleepover or whatever. But watching behind the scenes, they'd give the actors their own what do you call them, squibs, essentially, and then they'd be the ones to trigger it. I'm like, God, that sounds so fun, So I think that's a very strong Snyder film.
Well, I liked 300, but I want to say the last Snyder film I saw was Man of Steel, and I have not gone on to any of the Justice League because I hated Man of Steel. So I haven't even gone on. I haven't seen any of them. And I'm sure there's some things of worth, but Snyder, to me, it's like you never topped Dawn, because it was just intense. And there are some things now that I look back on, because I do frequent it. I'll let me put this in, and it's so ingrained in my mind that's now background. I'm going to do the dishes, so I'll put this in, because I don't have to pay attention. But those, looking at those, and there's things that don't quite keep up. I noticed there's some things. As amazed as I was with Polly's performance, it doesn't. There's certain choices she makes in there that I'm like, it's kind of flubby. I don't know. It's nothing big, but it's after seeing it that many times, it's like it doesn't live up to it.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love that movie.
Well, it's I've not knowing it then, but knowing it now. James Gunn wrote that script, and I wonder if Snyder actually. I think his big issue is he can't say no to a shitty script, which goes back to our script talk earlier, because he's a great visual director. I think he has the talent, the eye to see visually and all this stuff, but it's the script elements that he's trying to bring to life that just don't don't land at all.
God, I'm getting this terrible glare. Let me switch around. But he didn't write any of the Justice League. I mean, sure, he had his say on it, but to So he's never worked. He's not a writer. He's never written any of his own stuff, right?
No, he's a full-on director. Yeah, from my understanding. I mean, maybe he ghost writes, but um, from my
So then he
understanding,
can't. Yeah, he can't be blamed for. But I mean, someone of his power, you could certainly have some insights. If there's crap, then yeah, I put my name on this. I'm gonna have my say and make some changes.
yeah, exactly. But Snyder released the Snyder cut.
Oh God, I all of that stuff I'm looking at. I'm like, I got very caught up in the Marvel universe, but never in the DC stuff. It just never happened.
Yeah,
Man of Steel, I hated, so I'm like, okay, no, not interested.
I didn't mind Man of Steel. I thought it was like an interesting take, but BVS, I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
And then Justice League, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, what's the one? It's the Snyder cut. They want to do Justice League. That's the one that they're planning to release.
Yeah,
it's
because
like 900 hours or something.
because Joss Whedon stepped in due to Zack Snyder's daughter's passing.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a perfect example of like toxic fandom and giving in to toxic fandom, because they're like, release a Snyder cut, and it was always rumored, but then they had to like give him so much money, like what, $50 million to do reshoots. I'm like, so there was no cut, like there was no official cut. And especially if you have to add additional footage and whatever, and then it's gonna be like 4 hours long, like you said. It's just
not interested.
Yeah, well, then
you know what? I did love Wonder Woman, and I'm actually looking forward to 1984. So I take that all back. I did love that. So, but that's it.
I loved Aquaman for what it was.
There's an interest there, so I do need to actually see that, because I do like Jason Momoa, and so I'm like, all right, but it's just never caught up to my schedule. Like, oh, I'll get to it, but there is some interest there.
This might piss off some nerds, but just imagine it like Lord of the Rings, but underwater.
Okay.
So like instead of one ring, it's one trident.
Okay. Well, but it's what's his face directed it from Saw?
James Wan.
James Wan, yeah. I mean, that gives me some pause to watch, because I generally like his stuff. Although I didn't like The Conjuring, but I like the sequel better.
What?
Yeah. I don't know what it was. I have not revisited it because it's been out for what, 5, 6, 7 years. So I should revisit, but I did like the sequel better.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I realize too, it is a lot of, and I try to be as objective when I'm watching stuff, but a lot of it's like, what did you have for lunch that day? Is your stomach feeling oogie? Do you have a slight head? All these things, certainly put into how you react to the film. And so I try to be as objective as I can. I mean, as a film critic, that's important, but I know that little things in your life just will affect how you respond. So you try to, I don't know, fast for 4 days before moving on.
Well, and I was having this conversation with the guy, like the guy's website I write for. He's like, what's your turnaround rate? And I'm like, I don't know. It depends on my mood. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
I love the film. I could get it out within like an hour or two.
Yeah.
If I hated the film, I actually want to take a couple days so I don't come off as a douchey guy,
Listen, I always found that the middle ground, as far as likability, was the hardest to write. If I loved it, exactly what you said, I think because I always did 1,000-word reviews for the outlet that I was working for at the time. And it's like, I did one in 20 minutes. Obviously I had to edit, but Yeah. And the same with the really bad ones. They just come right out. It's the middle ground ones that I'm like, I don't know what I want to say. And so you just sit there looking at the keyboard. But it's funny you brought up, I don't want to look like a douche. I didn't know this, but someone told me, you've gotten kind of a reputation as a harsh critic.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, but I'm not, and I look at, because I have all of the reviews on my website, cataloged by star rating. And I'm like, there's a shit ton of 4.5-star reviews out of 5. That's a really solid, perfectly wonderful film. But then I also see that the second largest amount is like a 0.5 star, So, but I'm like, I equally like the really, or, hate the really bad as much as I love the really good. So, but when someone said that to me, I'm like, really? I don't know. I'm like, okay, sure. I guess that's a name I can be called, the harsh critic. Sure.
So when you got into criticism, were there critics that you kind of followed that you kind of like wanted to kind of like view films from the same perspective almost?
No, I mean I read film criticism for decades, and I always loved Roger Ebert 'cause I like when he'd be kind of smart ass. But um, there wasn't any particular person, and I realized that uh, other than a few technical things that my editor said, make sure you do this and this, and I just, I don't know, I just wrote what I thought, and I tried to make it interesting, and a lot of times I would do some sort of anecdote, personal life. There's a way for me to connect it, and one of the things I did frequently, I tried not to overuse it, but for the really bad films, um, I would pull out of my drawer of writing tricks, and I'm a big fan of Mommy Dearest, the old Faye Dunaway, Joan Crawford biopic. So there's a line in there where she's given a script by her manager slash boyfriend, and he's like, she hands it off to him. She's like, "It's no good," or "It's not good," and she shakes it in his face. So I use that in the bad reviews, like maybe once or twice a year. It's like as Joan Crawford said in Mommy Dearest, "It's not good." This long. I would always reference what it is and kind of explain it because it just so perfectly summed up what I felt. It's like, it's not good. It's just not good. And, so that's how I realized I started to find my own way of kind of introducing it or trying to personalize it, and the only thing I wish I had done, I mean, I still, like I said, do a few here and there, but I always came at it from the writing and the acting perspective because that's what I know. So I always felt like I kind of, and I can understand good editing or cinematography or, music. I can understand what is good and what is not. But I don't necessarily know if I could ever express it as clearly as I could about this is why your story sucked. This is why your acting was good. Because I would always give reasons. I wouldn't be one of those, this was stupid. I'd be like, this is why it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I wish I had kind of had a little more insight into that. Not that I have none, but it's just not my specialty. So,
Yeah. Well, I often find the criticism that's most constructive in a way, even like if the critic did not like the film at all, like, but they're like, if this would have been better if this or this, or whatever. Like,
yeah.
I feel like, because I feel like filmmakers and critics have like such a unique relationship,
Mm-hmm.
like they really do. And like a lot of the general audience, I feel like, are like, well, Rotten Tomatoes, it's fake or whatever. I'm like, that's not how Rotten Tomatoes works.
Yeah.
And like a lot of those critics are actually probably friends with these filmmakers, like,
Yeah.
like without each other, they don't have jobs essentially. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very
Yeah. It's very,
symbiotic relationship.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I feel like there's like a craft there, and there's an art to criticism as well. Like there,
Certainly.
so I think it's a very fascinating outlet.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I had a lot of the highs and lows as far as response. Um, I'd get the trolling of, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm like, it's my opinion. That's it. But I actually had, several filmmakers, when I did give them criticism, um, they would be like, I agree, or I wish I could have fixed that because now I see it after the film's, and like those kind of things. It's like I'll think about it for my next project, those kinds of things. And it was
Yeah.
always lovely for that. It's like not that I was looking for, hey, filmmaker, raise me up. It's like, no, this is what I thought, this is what I saw, that's it. But I did have some filmmakers, and there's one particular one that came to me directly and told me that I should be ashamed of myself because I gave him a bad review. And I was just like, in my head, it's like, I love that you did your project. And again, it's so hard to do. So I commend you, but you didn't put out a good product. I mean, but again, it's objective or subjective, excuse me. And so I was just supposed to be ashamed. And I just, in my head, all I could think was, you're in the wrong business, dude. And it wasn't like I reached out to review it. I think this came from his publicist. So you're putting it out there and you're asking people to look at it honestly. And one of my regrets, and I think I only did this maybe once or twice, but I actually used the term garbage in 2 reviews, and I regret it sort of. I mean, honestly, they were really terrible, but I'm like, I guess that's the lowest thing you could possibly say. But I sort of regret just being that abusive, because I didn't have to, but there were so many films that I would get done and I'd be angry. I'm like, this was just, I don't understand what they were doing. It was it was bad. It was terrible, whatever. But, um, but I mean, I'm not doing it anymore, like I said, here and there, but it was a, it was a lot of work. So, and I was covering festivals. And so, you do these, because I was generally doing like 10 reviews a month. But during festival season, all the horror film fest, because I worked for a horror site, I was doing, I think my record was maybe 35 full length reviews in 1 month. Because, like this festival is this part, and then at the end of the year or end of that month, there's more. And so it was, I miss it because I miss the socializing and meeting a lot of cool people, but I don't miss the work.
Yes. So when did you get out of criticism?
Well, I kind of stopped at the end of 2018. There were some issues with my outlet, and it was kind of wishy-washy what they were going to do. And then they came back to me a year later and said, "Do you want to?" Because I'd covered Screamfest, here in Hollywood for 6 straight years, and five, whatever it works out to, because that was my first gig, so it kind of rounded about. But he said, "Do you want to go cover it again?" And I said, "Yeah." I mean, because I love the people, I know the people, I want to go do it. And then that was it. I mean, I did, I think, like 12 articles for that festival last year. That was it. And the site's defunct now, as far as I know, which is kind of a bummer because my archives are gone.
So
4 years, yeah. I mean, I have all the Word documents, but there are no links to them anymore.
You would think they'd like do archives before getting rid of the website,
someone told me there's a way you can access stuff because they're still somehow on the web because they were, I don't know. But it's like it's amazing to me that is after all that work. I mean, I'm bummed, but I'm surprisingly like, okay. It's like I guess I'm maturing and not being a baby about it. There's nothing I can do about it. I've thought about publishing a book of my reviews, which would be kind of cool, but I don't know who owns the rights to them.
Yeah, that'd be cool if you figured out the rights. I mean, that'd be really cool. I would buy the book, just so you know.
Yay! Customer number one.
No, the reason I asked you, like, if you followed other critics is just because, like, for me, I have like select few that I can trust, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes
who has your same worldview, and tastes.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll disagree with them. I'm like, okay, that's kind of harsh. Like, I enjoyed that, but like, right. I see where they're coming from. But
who? Well, who? Like who? Who's an example?
David. He writes for IndieWire. David, is it Eldridge?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
They say his last name. I don't want to murder his last name. Scott Weinberg's another one that I really like. So,
I mean, I found that certainly once I got the gig, that I didn't want to know what anybody thought.
Yeah.
Because I even like going to these, film festivals and they'd have the Q&As with the producer, writer, director, actors. I would generally jet. I'm like, I don't want anything to color what I have seen, So I think I avoided certainly horror film reviews for 4 or 5 years. I'm like, I don't want to know what they thought because probably I'm going to be reviewing it and I don't want to have any coloration,
Yeah, well, I think it was earlier this year, there was a website that kind of went down, but a lot of those critics were, because I follow some of them on Twitter and they were like looking for freelance work because that was their livelihood. And they've posted actually like a lot of interesting film essays, which isn't like reviews. Yeah. It's just like a different take on a film. And I kind of like those too, because it's a very in-depth and it's very personal to them, definitely. Which I admire. So I think you should find out who has those rights and get that book, man.
I mean, because it would be, they're all there. I mean, I have all the documents, so it's not like I don't have to type or anything or think of anything. It's like, just put them in there and I don't know. It's a possibility, but it's also a matter of laziness, and I just have other things to deal with right now. So but in the future, it totally because it does feel bad. when I really stop and think about it, it's like, shit, I put a lot of time and thought and effort, and they're just not available anymore.
Yeah. So now you're in acting and writing and directing. Is that correct?
Well, not directing so much. I've been acting since I was like 8. I'm not seeking out things, like I'm not on the circuit because that's just not what I want to be doing. But again, now I know a lot of filmmakers, and so sometimes I'll plug myself as an actor, and that's the problem. Everyone sees me as a writer. Everyone's like, "You're an actor?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I was trained in." So, but nobody knows that. It's like I had no idea. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So again, I'm not really putting myself out there, um, but yeah, I mean, screenwriting is just total focus now. I mean, if something comes up acting wise and someone says you'd be good for this, fine, I'll do it. I didn't have to audition and go through the process. Great. So, but those are far and in between. But yeah, screenwriting is just it's where I'd rather be, creatively.
Do you have any projects in the works? You mentioned you had a boxing comedy. Was that a short film?
No, it was a feature. Yeah, it's we finished it. We started it last year, and I actually met Motown is his name. He and I were in an acting class together a couple years ago, and a mutual friend of ours said, "Well, Motown's like, I want to write a script." And so our mutual friend said, "Well, talk to Michael." And so Motown kind of pitched it to me, and then we got it done. I think in about a year's time from start to finish. And it's really pretty good. And again, it's outside of my realm. So, but I mean, comedy is, most of my horror scripts do have elements of comedy. That's just the way my brain works, and the characters are going to have, snide remarks and whatever. But, it was fun. But I mean, yeah, mostly it's horror. It's like, I just can't not go there. And so, I mean, I'm working on 2, paid gigs right now, and, I've got, I think, 4 feature scripts that I'm piddling away on when I have time to do them. So, but it's as much as the pandemic's been insane and weird, this is my most productive writing year ever. I hate to say that because it sounds like a brag, but it's kind of shocking, and like, oh, I've never written this much ever. And so, great. I'm going to just keep, like I said, looking at the positive side. Yay, projects
Dude,
are done.
once things get back to normal, there's going to be a huge surge of smaller films being made,
Yeah.
and it's all going to be stemming from this
Oh
quarantine.
God, yeah. This creative period, people are just cranking stuff through, and you're
I'm
right,
ex-
it's going to be a renaissance.
yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of comes from it. I because like I mean, if you look at the what's that movie called? Contagion.
Yeah,
Like if we have another pandemic movie, I don't want it to be like Contagion, and I don't want
yeah,
it to like be too close to like COVID because like it sucks.
yeah. It does, and um, that's the thing. I mean, I'm assuming people are afraid that it's just going to be an onslaught of contagion, pandemic, quarantine movies, either shot in quarantine
Yeah,
or that's the subject matter, and I think we're going to be in for that for at least 2 years. Like that's what's going to be happening, and maybe not necessarily directly related, but somehow about loneliness and isolation and all of those things. Um, I think we're in for it. So it's not going to, and hopefully it will be something of a healing process as we. Oh wow, we're getting through. We made it through, and now we can kind of look back with more objective eyes.
I think it was it Tubi or what's the other app?
Hulu?
Not Hulu. Is it Hulu? I don't know. There's a whatever platform I'm on. There's always like a commercial for like this TV show about that's being made in Corona like during COVID, and it's
Okay.
about love in COVID. I'm like, that's not normal. And then all these
Yeah.
dating sites are doing these commercials now, like it's okay. We've enabled the video chat so you could see people in quarantine. Like that's
Oh
weird.
Lord.
That's not normal.
But isn't it strange though that there are so many things that even after 8 or 9 months that this has all begun is there are things that I don't even notice anymore. I think that's what's so strange. It's like you very noticeable when people aren't wearing masks. I go out to get groceries twice a month. That's basically all we do. And and you don't forget it anymore, just things like that. And certainly like talking on Zoom with you and with other people, it's so second nature now.
Yeah.
Because initially, like I said, it's clunky. I don't know what to do. I'm 90, and so but it is something that's like, oh, we're gonna get on Zoom. Okay, easy. I get it. I know what to do. I can unmute. So
Well, I was listening to this podcast today. Forgot what it was called. I just found it today, actually, on Spotify. But this guy was interviewing the showrunner, and the showrunner has two shows going on, and he's like, I would never be able to run two different writing groups if it wasn't for COVID, because
sure,
I can now be on Zoom within like minutes of each other.
yeah.
Like I don't have to be in separate rooms. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like Zoom's,
What?
I think Zoom's going to stay. Like I think
Oh,
this workforce is
absolutely.
going to stay. It's just how is it going to be implemented? Essentially,
I totally agree. It's the new normal. I mean, I hate that term, but it is going to stick around. There's no doubt about it because people can still do their job from their location, and then you don't have the overhead. I'm sure a lot of like physical locations are just going to be defunct because we don't need you there. I mean, the social aspect is certainly a bummer, but um, yeah, I mean, that's gonna be part of life now.
So, living in LA, like how is it there with the pandemic? The news makes it look awful, and I was wondering, is it that bad?
No, I mean, we don't go out. We used to go out and walk a lot, and we used to go out, take public transportation, just go to some place, do
Yeah.
whatever, walk, whatever. I mean, we don't do that anymore because there is that sense of people are acting the crazy fool right now, in a lot of different ways and for a lot of reasons. So I'd rather just not engage, And the good thing is that I am freelance. I haven't worked a survival job in 5 years. My husband's retired. So we already were that's just the way our life was. We're already hermits anyway. So I feel lucky that we didn't have that same transition that a lot of people did about being 24/7 together. We already did that. We've been doing it for years. So it's like, okay, so we're home. This is what we were doing anyway, So I feel lucky in that because I know a lot of people that adjustment has been horrific.
So I kind of talked about, like the projects coming out of this period. I wonder like what the divorce rates will be.
Oh man. Well, because it's sad because you're also seeing a lot of reports that domestic abuse is really
Yeah.
up, and I get it. I mean, it's powder keg scenarios. People are stuck in together in close quarters for a long time. I mean, you're looking now 9 months of some people being together all the time. So yeah, I have a feeling that'll probably equal the domestic abuse rate as the divorce rate. It's just like and it's sad. It's unfortunate, but I guess I mean, maybe to learn that now that maybe you aren't compatible because in the worst of scenarios, it didn't quite gel. I don't know. But
Yeah, I don't know either. And like, my Facebook's been so diverse too. I mean, especially with the election.
yeah,
And just and knowing that there are spouses out there who have different views, and I just can't imagine like how will you
well,
survive
I,
that?
yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And frankly, maybe we should write that script because, I mean, if you have these differing political views and you can maybe go your separate ways, but now that if you have those differing political views in the same household and you're stuck together, man, the fireworks, I have to imagine how bad that is.
It's like the white elephant 24/7 being
It's
talked
like,
about.
man, yeah, I would not want to be. I mean, I guess a fly on the wall for character development. Like, let me watch this, but yeah, you wouldn't want to be part of that.
Oh, housewives gone alcoholics because of their husbands.
Yeah, yeah,
Vice versa. Yeah, that was the thought that came to mind though, was I wonder how these people are surviving with this political climate.
yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Talk
bring,
about anxiety, right?
bring it
Thank you.
back. So how low has been like pursuing film? Like how low has that brought you on your path?
Um, I famously call myself a neurotic freak bag because I'm constantly anxious, even before the events of the past 9 months. I'm always on edge.
Yeah.
I find it very hard to relax. And that certainly pertains to, writing as well. I rarely find that moment of being pleased with my productivity because generally I feel like, if I look at it, logically, I'm like, I actually have done pretty well. And I try to tell myself that, like, you're doing okay. You're getting some stuff done. But, a down day is like, the end of the world for me. It's like, oh, even if I didn't do one of those, like we talked about, 4 pages of crap, at least I got something out. It doesn't have to be the most perfect thing, but yeah, I mean, I'm never pleased with progress. It's just constantly second guessing myself and kind of putting myself down. And you mentioned, in your note for the call, about self doubt. It's like, man, and it's kind of a two-way street because one thing is good is that I don't stay down on myself for a long while. Like, I submit to a lot of festivals and competitions with my scripts, and obviously I get way more rejections than I do, praise. So,
Yeah.
but I found that it only takes me 24 hours to get out of that funk. Like, I'll get the rejection. I'm like, oh, that's kind of sucky. By the next day, I'm like, okay, whatever, next. But I find the same way is I can't dwell on a good feeling. I think maybe because I feel like it's uh, self-indulgent or there's so many things constantly in my head as a neurotic artist. It's like it's just a matter of, it's like a slalom course. Yeah. But the lowest I've been is just, every day at some point I'm down on my productivity, or those pages sucked, or I didn't get into that festival, whatever it is. There's always something that, let me hammer you down.
So then what would you say like is the consistent highs that you experience?
Um, it doesn't happen all the time, but there's those, like we talking about train of thought writing, is that when I get into the zone and then I find myself coming out of the zone and realizing that that's where I've been, that's the high. And that's probably maybe 4 or 5 times a month where you really fall into it and it's like, oh my God, and you get out. Of course, maybe, subsequent drafts, you're like, what was I thinking here?
Yeah.
But it's really nice to be in those highs when you're so deeply engaged in what is happening on the page. And I wish it could happen more often, but that also is what makes it so special and what gives you that high, because man, to be in there where you're 100% in the world that you're creating. And I love being there, and certainly there's a quote that I say all the time is Ray Bradbury, and he says, you must stay, I'm paraphrasing, you must stay drunk on writing so reality cannot destroy you. And I wholeheartedly subscribe to that. Let me be in here where I mean, certainly people are being disemboweled. It could be, gross, but it's better here, Anyway.
No, I think I love that outlook. Because it kind of forces you to keep on writing. Number one.
Yeah.
Because I often find that if I'm not writing, it's hard to get back into it. And I like listen to this podcast. I listened to like 3 or 4 episodes. I wish I knew the name of it. I think it's the Writers Podcast. It might.
Oh, okay. Well, if you figure it out, send me a link.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It might be that simple. But the Writers. I think that's it. But this guy was just talking. It was an interview with the guy who wrote Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
And the Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Like
yeah.
these very just fun movies, entertainment, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he always writes, and it's always a schedule for him where he'll just write from like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then he'll write for like 3 hours, take a break, do what he needs to do around the house, take the calls, emails, get back to it in the evening. And then sometimes if the night lets him, he'll still write. I'm like, man, that'd be so cool to be on that set schedule.
So you don't have any kind of set schedule for your writing?
I try. It depends. Because I do office work, number one.
Okay.
And so it's like a 9 to 5 job, and then I'm doing either film criticism on the side, or I'm doing podcasts on the side.
Yeah.
or it's sometimes I'll do freeform writing, which I think is kind of fun. Or it's a script writing. It just depends on the mood, depends what's going on. And then by the time I get done with like the podcast, or if I'm editing videos or whatever, like it's like 8:00 and I forgot to eat, and I have to go to bed because I have to get up at 6:00 in the morning for work.
Okay.
So it's like, it just depends. I wish I had a schedule, and I know I should be on that. And I feel like I've watched over like 200 films during quarantine, which I feel like is a gross amount of material. Because I feel like there's a lot of those movies were not that great, you know.
Sure.
2020 has not been a great year for movies. We'll just put it that way.
No, yeah.
And I know if I would have spent that time either writing or reading a book, if I'm not going to write, you know, at least indulge myself in reading a book. That way it's still having to do with words and getting like the gears turning.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. It's just finding that balance.
This is the thing though. I commend you. And the reason why, and this is something that I've actually been talking to my shrink about. So full disclosure here, but I carry this immense amount of guilt around because I worked retail for 500 years, or so, give or take a few. And so 5 years ago, I was, circumstances changed so that I was able to freelance completely. And I do not have a day job. I haven't had for 5 years. So I have this constant sense of someone like you and a lot of my friends that are working 9 to 5, and they're still doing their art, and they're doing it well, and they're doing it consistently. And I carry this guilt and I think that's part of the beating myself up as far as productivity, because in my head, I'm like, why the fuck aren't you getting more done? You don't have a day job. You're home every day. You don't, and so I carry that around, like, because I see you and I see other people, like, they're working their 9 to 5 and they come home and they still do their art. And I mean, I did that for a lot of years too, but I feel bad that I get a lot done, but I feel like I'm not using my time as wisely as I should. And then I look at people that would be like, dude, get off your ass. You got a full day to get stuff done. And I got my 9 to 5. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm trying. So I commend you for that, because a lot of people will come home after a 9 to 5 and be like, I'm going to watch TV. That's it. I don't have it in me. And I get it. I understand that, so people that still do it no matter what, that just tells you how passionate you are. I still got to do this because I gotta. This is just what I got to do. So, yay, you.
Yeah, well, I mean, going on that though, like, I mean, you've done your part from the sounds of it, doing retail and then doing the passion stuff afterward. And so you kind of deserved these days of like not doing anything. Like,
well,
you worked hard to get to where you are,
I'll take that. I don't take, kindness easily, but I that makes sense to me, but there's still the constant. I should be doing more because I have the opportunity to do more, and but it is something that I can look to someone like you and be like, well, that's kind of an inspiration, like, okay, it's going to kind of keep me pushing on because you're doing it and you still have to work this, survival. Okay. What do they call it in Utah? Because I have always called it a day job, but then I went to a theater in Tennessee and they called it a survival job. So what do you call it?
I just call it a job. Pays the bills.
There you go.
It's not a bad job either. I mean, it pays okay.
Yeah.
More than okay, especially in Utah, given that Utah's minimum wage is still $7.25 or something like that.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
$7.50 maybe, but I am above that, so I'm grateful for that. And Utah got hit really hard too with COVID, so I'm grateful I still have a job during that whole circumstance, because
certainly
I know a lot of people who did not, and even like a lot of coworkers who got laid off, and it's just like, what's going on? So I'm grateful for that, and
yeah.
So.
Well, you're still doing your art on the side, so that's important.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And like, because like I release this podcast like weekly, and I'm trying to get in the better of the habit of just pre-recording stuff way in advance, so that way I can take the times off and not have to worry about this, because it's not like a hassle. It's just like, if I didn't do this, then I'd be writing. You know what I mean? And so as long as I stay on schedule for this side of the craft, then I can focus on other stuff and still make it look like I'm busy with the other one, even though it's like, no, it's my vacation.
Have you been able to do it at all? Like done 2 in a week so that you're a week ahead? Have you been able to do it?
Yeah, I have 4 this week actually, because of I've posted on my Facebook being like, hey, I'm looking for guests because I kind of want to really do this. And Deuce and a couple other friends just like shared, out of nowhere, just shared it. And then all these people, like including you, like, messaging me. Did that work? Was like, I'm like, is this like, should I be ashamed for like asking for guests to come on? Because,
no.
And then I'm like, no, like,
please,
everybody's just
like I don't want to come on and shamelessly self promote. Like, come on, everyone's out to do that. If you give me a spot to babble on, yeah, I'm in.
So yeah, no, I have 4 this week, and then I have actually like 4 next week, and I'm like, that's like 2 months worth of podcasts, And if I get those all edited within like a whole day's worth of like on a Saturday, it's like, yo, what's up? And then I could like go back to my routine, which was recording like the day of before or a couple days before, and just putting it out there.
I mean, get ahead, but don't lose that cushion.
Yeah.
Make sure you still, every 2 weeks, you have to do another one, and then you're still ahead.
Yeah.
So that's the key. So get ahead and don't lose it.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully, here's the thing with COVID too. Before this was like in-person podcasts, right? Because like, I don't know. I always like the in-person stuff because it's more for personal connection,
Sure.
And then COVID hit. I'm like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
And I had like maybe 5 episodes pre-recorded before that. I'm like, well, maybe COVID will be over by the time episode 9 is out, right?
Yeah.
That was not a thing. So that was episode 9, but now, I mean, you'll be episode 35, I think, if I'm doing my math correctly. So like, that's how long the Zoom's been going on. I'm like, well, once COVID is over, I'm like, maybe I'll stick with Zoom. Like, I'll give people the option to do it in person because like that's would be my preference. But like, Zoom's not bad because look, you're in LA.
Yeah.
And we're still having a good time. I think we're having a good time.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I have a couple of buddies, college buddies that started a podcast, I want to say 1.5 years ago. And it's about, they call it The Movie Show. I'm not trying to plug it, but just so you know what the subject matter is. But they did it in person, just the 2 of them. But now, because they had to switch over to Zoom, they're getting, I've been on like 5-6 times, which we wouldn't have done because they're in Minneapolis. So it's actually opened up a lot of avenues for them to have all these other people on to talk about movies, because they couldn't have done it otherwise unless they were in Minneapolis. So it actually, I think you totally embrace that if you can get people in person because it's a more enjoyable experience. But shit, this just opens up your avenues.
It does, because like doing it in person, like Utah is, I don't know, there's a lot of creatives in Utah, but like, it's nice to branch out to like people in LA or to people in New York, essentially, because it just broadens the horizons. And if I only did it in person, it would have to be people in Utah. Then it'd become like a Utah only podcast, which wasn't like my intention going forward. And like for the longest time, I was afraid. Yeah, okay, I'll say it. I was afraid to even do Zooms because I'm like, I don't know how it's going to be. I don't know how this podcast is going to take its form. I don't know how it's going to take off because I've attempted many other podcasts that have never really taken off like throughout the years.
Okay.
But I'm like, fuck it. Like I'm going to stick with it and so be it, And so, yeah.
But 35 episodes. So that's the COVID episodes, or that's total episodes is 35?
So COVID episodes would be episode 10. So after episode, like, so COVID hit, and it was like during the phase of like, can we still hang out? Yeah, we can probably hang out, like we don't, it's not hitting our state yet, essentially.
Yeah.
But then the last person I interviewed in person, she actually went to LA like a couple days before. And like, I remember like anxiety, like she's sitting across from me. I'm like, so she left and like, I sanitized everything. I'm like, I'm not doing it in person anymore. Like that, the anxiety I felt, I'm like, nope, Zoom it is. So I just did Zoom and here we are, man.
I love it. No, but it's so, because you can connect anywhere. It's why not do that? And then it's just it's a richer variety of people that you have access to. I think it's a smart idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it kind of opens up the avenue too. Cause like I have been trying to get better at, last year I was all about winging it. I never had a calendar or anything to look at. I'm like, I don't think I have plans tonight, like, whatever. But now I have the Google Calendar. I found out the magic of Gmail. how great it is that you can actually schedule stuff and not have to be a hassle. And so now with this, like, if I pre-record all these episodes, I can like plan like the release dates, and then that way I know when people are going to be. And like, I'm like, for the Christmas episode, I'm like, I have to say something about Christmas. Like, by the time it comes out, it'll be Christmas. I'm like, well, I can't be on Christmas because it's a Friday. So I'm like, Christmas Eve. We could talk about like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's just pre-planning. So it's kind of fun, but.
Well, again, I'll commend you, and I commend my buddies that do it as well. It's like, God, it seems like a lot of work. And I mean, I'm just happy to come on guest because I just come on and talk and don't have to do anything. So I love that it's available and that people are taking it upon themselves to, want to be heard and discuss fun things and interesting topics. So yeah, good job, man.
So what was your first script that you wrote? Did you ever make your first script?
No, I've only actually made 2 of my short films, and that was when I was still in Chicago, like 13 years ago. So I've just been cranking through writing. I mean, I do want to eventually move into that direction, but that's not my forte and not my knowledge. So it will happen. I foresee it happening, but right now I'm just cranking on scripts. The one I'm working on right now will be my 14th feature spec. So I just want to have that catalog, and I went to a class, a screenwriting class very early on when I was kind of first, because I started my first script 16 years ago, right around when Dawn of the Dead, the remake, came out. But I had an idea for a great role for myself. So that's why I wrote it, because I wanted to be in it, With this class that I had early on, actually first when I moved out here to LA is, she's like, don't expect to get anywhere until you've got like 20 scripts in your pocket. I'm like, because I was on my second script at that point. So I'm like, that's stupid. But I kind of have kept that in the back of my head. Like, somewhere when I get to 19, maybe it'll be broken. The options will just start coming fast and furious, but, I mean, I really am really proud of how much I've done. But again, I should have more. Should have a little more at this point.
Dude, 14. I mean, that's see. Do you have Twitter?
Yeah.
So do you follow is it C. Robert Cargill?
No, but the name maybe I do. It sounds familiar.
So he's a writing partner of Scott Derrickson's.
Okay.
And he always like tweets these like writing advice, and he's like, if you write 1 page a day for a whole year, you'll have 3 feature scripts done. Like put that, put in that perspective. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. And then you try to write that 1 page a day. You're like, fuck.
But that's commitment. If you can commit to that, man, yeah, dude, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you my heads up. So I redid this, I think maybe a couple weeks ago, because I was in one of those down artist moments. So I'm like, let me recount what I've accomplished this year. And then I posted it on Facebook because, it's a little bit of a brag, let's be honest, but I'm like, this is what I've gotten done. So yay, I'm happy. Let me give you that 2 seconds of me being ecstatic before I fall back into despair. But it's like I finished. So the boxing script was completed at the beginning of the year. I had another feature that I started in December of last year, which I finished in April of this year. I started another script in the beginning of May, and I just finished that in September, like all the way through. I've been working on, I put time in on 1, 2, 3, 4 other features this year of my own, plus the 2 projects I've been hired on, but I've been putting a lot of time in on those. So I'm like, that's
a lot.
Yeah. So it's just, but it never feels great to me until it's done. Whatever done means, it's like I put it on here. I've started to submit, like the one I just finished in September. I've already submitted, I think, 15 competitions. So now that's just the waiting game. And so let me work on something else while I, wait to hear. So I mean, I again, logically, I can look at it, or objectively, I guess is the term, and be like, okay, it's pretty good.
Pretty good. It's an understatement, sir.
There should be more. That's all I'm saying.
I've only finished 2 feature drafts this year, but there were scripts I started like 2 years ago, and then last year I worked on my short film, and then did that festival circuit, and then after
Yeah.
that, like it was like a huge creative depression where I was just like, it's like I feel like that's like a thing that's just gonna come back, like after every project, it's gonna be that period.
Oh, for
But
sure.
knowing that now, like at this young of an age, for me at least, like I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I could better prep for it essentially. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you know it, I mean, it's not necessarily easy or fun, but if you kind of know, all right, I'm going to feel bad for a while.
yeah,
And my last three solo scripts, I actually wrote a blog about it because I'm like, I called it the Therapy Trilogy because there's a lot of shit that was dug up in there. A lot of childhood stuff that, I mean, I'm all aware it wasn't like hidden, but it's like it started to kind of seep into these scripts.
yeah,
So talking about a post completion, man, a couple of those were like, I'm glad to have this all out because, it's cheap therapy, but it was kind of nice to be in some of those zones and to kind of re-experience some of it, not all of it, but that was a big depression because it was such a deeply personal exercise to be that far back into these childhood memories. And and those three scripts, all three of them, at least four times each during the writing at certain stages, I was breaking down. I was sitting at the computer sobbing because there was some kind of things going on there. But so yeah, that depression was even more so with those personal scripts. It's like, okay, I kind of put this to bed in a lot of ways. It's like,
yeah.
so
Well, I think one thing I really enjoy about writing as well is like being reflective. And like you
mhm.
said, like revisiting, memories and having a good clear picture, especially because you're kind of repainting it with words,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And being able to recognize that, I think also puts a new perspective, like with not writing, like you're able to take a step back in other situations and be more pensive and like, reflective essentially. And
Yeah.
so, no, I
But
totally get where you're coming from.
But isn't that what we do as writers? I mean, it's just everything is something
Yeah.
and could somehow be used. How you're looking at things and how your memory colors. How you look at things and how is that going to? I mean, that's what I've never considered myself an observer, I guess, but as a writer, I think it's just inherent. You just see things and like, what was it? Right before, I think it was right after the first presidential debate and we're CNN watchers, if that gives you my political leanings. But it's we were watching, and Van Jones, one of the pundits, I don't remember what it was, but he used the terminology. It's a stench in the nostrils of God, and I immediately like, oh, Jesus, I mean, we got to write that down. That's an incredible phrase. And that was in October. I have 55 pages on a first draft of a new script based on that thing. So I think that's what's fun about us as writers is like anything can spark something.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just, it goes down a path that doesn't lead anywhere. But when it does, and then I can look back and say, hey, thanks, Van Jones. You said something on TV and I got a feature out of it. Great. And when those things come, that's one of the other highs, like we talked about earlier, is like when you find something that isn't going to let go,
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like the little things and like watching the little things like inspires like these bigger things, like
Oh, yeah.
massive things. And like, I mean, for example, like I was helping my Nana like put up like a little thing on her gate thing at her house, for privacy or whatever. And like there
Yeah.
was this praying mantis that was like staring at us the
Yeah.
whole time. Like, man, that's such a cool creature. And so I did a lot of research into it, and then it transpired into like this horror script I'm still writing. And I'm like, this is fucked. Like those praying mantises are terrifying, man.
Yeah.
and then like the murder hornets came out this year, and then there's a video of a praying mantis like tearing that apart. Like,
Really?
yeah, I'll send you the link to that too. It was
Okay.
really
That might
fascinating
be
to
too
watch.
horrific. But that's what's so cool because this is I don't know how to explain this. I think I've tried to explain this in other scenarios, but I find um, it's not a matter of being above someone or greater than someone, but I love the fact that as writers that we can do things like that because there's some people. I think everyone has some sort of creativity in them, but it's a matter of whether they really find it and pursue it. But I love the fact that people like us, it is this a praying mantis on a gate. Anyone else will be like, oh, that's cool. Those things are kind of scary. but and a line from CNN. It's like these things that suddenly go and then take these weird directions that a lot of people wouldn't understand. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's something that again, when I'm trying to keep myself positive, it's like, what a gift. What a lovely thing to be able to use your mind that way, where a lot of people maybe can but don't know how to access it. And so it's such a, I hate the term blessing, but it's like I try to again be like, wow, look what you get to do every day. Some days it's not easy, but trying to keep that perspective of, how lucky we are to be artists.
Well, I love the moments too where, I mean, for example, if you do write every day or like, force yourself to write through those 4 pages and like you said, you're going to find the gold in there
The
somewhere
jewel, yeah.
eventually, the eventually part I think is what like gets a lot of writers down because they're like, they want it instantaneous, right? But
Mm-hmm.
5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, even like somebody will say like one line and it triggers you back to this idea that you had. You're like, that's
Oh,
it. That's the missing
absolutely.
puzzle piece. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Jerry Seinfeld is writing the joke like in his sleep. And then the whole episode, he's like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get
Yeah.
it. And then it comes to him and he's like, oh.
I know. I remember that episode. Yeah, because it's like you finally get it, and then it's just not all that.
Yep.
Which is, I guess, even worse if you've been waiting on it for a long time, and then you finally get it, and like, oh, it's too bad. But
It's a
it's true.
shame.
But I think that's interesting how our minds work. It's like there's always something coming back, or something will spark something, and it's so. I'm so happy I have that. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I've had exes and flings be like, I'm worried what you're going to be putting on paper. And I'm like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
like you shouldn't be worried about it. Then like sometimes events do happen. And I'm like, yo,
Yeah.
I got the idea.
Well, there's plenty of those memes out there that like, treat me properly. I'm a writer. You don't know what's going to come out of this. Be nice to me. Because
It's
it's
such a,
true.
it's true. It's such a douchey thing, but I mean, it's so true because like, I don't know. I like how you're putting it is that like our minds work differently and
Yeah.
it's not better than anybody else. It's just a
No,
whole
it's
different
just
framework.
for sure.
And being able to use our own experiences to put new experiences on the paper, which can inspire other people to pursue it.
Yeah.
I think the whole inspiring other thing is like what really kind of like that makes me kind of like, oh my God, like how would I of people be able to do that? Like
Yeah.
will I ever be? But so I don't know. How do you hope you can inspire others? Like let's ask that question.
I mean, I guess just pushing forward. It's like I have a lot of friends, and I'm not going to obviously name names, but there's a lot of people that I want to write.
Yeah.
Then do it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of friends, and I adore them, I love them, but there's a lot of that I've heard for years. I want to write. Then do it. And my thing is, if I can be some sort of inspiration, because I'm trying to crank out as much product as I can, and and so I hope that they look at that as like, oh, you can do it, and it's possible, and I'm all my friends knowing how neurotic and anxious I am constantly, so I can still do it, even in spite of all that crap, or maybe because of it. So, but it's I think that's what if there's anything that I could do is just do it. Just that there's no reason not to. I mean, you might get something out of it, you might not, but if you don't do it, you won't know that. It's so, and that's the thing. I hope people can, because I'm not, like I said, I'm a shameless self promoter. So if I get a good chunk of pages done in a day, I'm posting about it because man, I wrote 10 pages today, and just because I feel great, I'm gonna share. So if people can take from that and be like, he's cranking out a lot of pages. This is great. I'm gonna do that too,
Yeah.
And whether they do or don't, I don't know. And I don't want to. I certainly don't want to hold myself as some ideal. Like I said, I'm a neurotic freak bag. Who wants that? So.
No, I totally understand that. Like one of the features, both features I finished this year, the last remaining half of like the third act or whatever, I somehow pushed through like these like enormous amounts of pages in the span of like, 3 or 4 hours. I know, right? And like it's like one of those like rare, like it's the water behind the dam of this like blockage, right? Like
Yes, yeah,
all of a
yeah,
sudden, like boom,
yes.
surprise, motherfucker, like and
Yeah,
so I'm way overblown it there. Weird. Okay, whatever. So but the software I use, I use Fade, and what do you use?
Final Draft.
You use Final Draft. Is Final Draft able to tell you like how much time you've been spending like on the script?
I don't know. I mean, I think I have an older version, probably a couple behind, but I've been using that since I started, and I guess I've never really. It's so second nature to me. I've never really branched out into what other things are offered because
Yeah.
I'm like, I just know what I'm going to do, and so I mean, maybe I should, but I don't think that's. I mean, possibly. I
No,
don't know is the answer to your question.
because so like Fade in offers, and I found it like on accident. Like it wasn't even a thing I was looking for. It was just like one of those cool like, oh, that does it. Like, okay, I've spent 5-6 hours and only wrote like half a page. That's cool.
Oh,
Like
so,
it's
well, I don't know if
depressing.
I'd want to know that.
Yeah, well, it was really like kind of like a boner let down, like
Yeah,
upon finding it. But these 2 nights that I finally finished these 2 different drafts, like it was
yeah.
like I think like 15, 16 pages in the span of 3 hours. And then I was like, I have to brag about it. Like there's
Oh,
no way
hell yeah.
I have to brag about it. And
Yeah,
so bragging about it, there was like screenwriting friends from school who were like, dude, how the fuck did you,
yeah.
how? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. It was probably the wine. I don't fucking know. you know?
But yeah, I mean, I think you should. And I'm not above bragging. I mean, I don't do it to be a douche, but like, geez, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I think my record was because I obviously the only time I'm ever going to get a thing like that is on the vomit draft. Because once
Yeah.
you go start to rewrite, that's all different.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, I think my record, I think was like 35 pages in one day, brand new pages. And my record overall ever, I wrote a 77-page first draft of one of my features in 4 days.
Dude.
And I still hold that as like kind of the holy grail. Will I ever reach that again? I mean, because I'm sure it was a mess, but still, I got from point A to point Z in 4 days. I mean, that was like, I remember getting done and like, what can I do? Who can I talk to? This is amazing.
Man, that's
But
that's
yeah,
a
you should
feat.
celebrate those things. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be on social media or whatever, but yeah, celebrate those milestones because it's only going to push you harder.
Yeah.
If you give yourself that moment of credit and be like, yeah, and that's just going to get you excited. Well, now what can I do when I get back into it?
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. We don't celebrate those milestones enough, or we might, but we don't do it for long enough.
Yeah.
So good for you.
It reminds me of like playing like a basketball video game, and you make like this godly character who makes Michael Jordan look like an amateur
Right.
essentially, and beating all these records. And I'm like, oh, I just scored 102 points in a game. Who holds the most points in a game ever? My guy. It's kind of like, but it's like after you're done with that, you're like, can I get 103? Like,
For sure.
try to like
Yeah,
outdo it.
what are you going to do to outdo? I'm going to switch go this direction. The sun just keeps shifting. Of course, it's night by 5 o'clock now. So, but I agree. It's like but that's what's going to push you. Like, okay, what can I do on the next round?
Yeah.
But I remember that 35 page. That might even have been on that script that I was talking about. 35 pages in one day was just like, again, like, can I go to the mountaintops with a bullhorn and let everybody know? Because damn.
No, that's a feat. And I remember, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was for a horror script I was writing, and I had class off because I was going to school then, like working part time. And my house didn't have internet because we were moving, and so I had to go to my grandparents and like, can I use your guys' crappy computer to write? Because like a cloud based script platform I was using, and they're like, sure, whatever. And like I wrote a huge chunk of that middle half like in the afternoon, and then of course all that went haywire after I rewrote it. But that's like you said earlier, there's those gems within
Yeah,
those
you'll
pages,
find
you
some.
know.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was talking about. That kind of being in the zone, like to just crank through so fast. Because I've realized now when I kind of get in the zone, it usually is for one scene.
yeah,
I can't. I generally once I finish a scene, then I got to break and do something else. But some of my scenes early on in the vomit drafts are 6, 7 pages, which of course are too long. But to just get into there and then I crank it out, and I'm like, this has just been 1 hour, 6 pages in an hour. I'm gonna celebrate that. But it's true. You should celebrate any pages.
yeah.
You get one done a day. Well, it's one you didn't have. So again, it's like I try to
It,
stay positive.
it's like one page that somebody did not write.
It's true.
So
Because it's the thing is that, like I said, these people that say I'm going to write them and I'm going to write. Well, I did it already.
yeah,
I'm just continuing on my course because I've realized that it has gotten not necessarily easier, but my flow is easier once I get the idea because I've done it enough. I don't really. It's just a matter of figuring out the story. It's not about formatting or structure or anything like that. It's just getting in there because I know eventually it's going to be fine.
yeah.
You know.
Stepping stones, like minor stepping
Exactly.
stones
Yeah.
to a bigger picture. That's what's fun too, is like all these different scripts you're writing, there's like all these different paths, and like they all lead to one overall feeling for yourself of accomplishment, essentially, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how long it takes to get there, it just matters when
Yeah.
you get there because eventually you will.
Yeah. And I don't ever want to take it for granted, that
Yeah.
I've gotten this far. Obviously, I haven't won any Oscars or anything like that, but I'm doing what I love, and I realize that even if I weren't trying to pursue this as a career, as a business, I would still be doing it. It wouldn't really matter. Because I said to somebody today or yesterday, I'm sorry, like I just got to get this out of my head. This is not because I want to make a living or make a lot of money. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that's the best place to be coming from.
Now, when you have ideas and like you're like problem solving, you're like trying to fit the puzzle or fit
Yeah.
the piece in the puzzle. Do you have somebody you call where you're like, okay, bear with me. This is what I'm thinking. How does it sound? Kind of a thing, or
No,
no?
I mean my husband sometimes I'll throw ideas at him, um, but I generally don't because I have a story editor and a script consultant that I have used for I think my past like 8 scripts, but she doesn't see anything until third draft.
Yeah.
So we have definitely some deeper conversations because at that point there's still a lot of things that can move. Um, so I have a couple of people I usually go to, but she's the one that kind of has this weird insight as far as continuity and she just it's things that other people won't necessarily pick up on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's later down the road. But I don't really have anyone I call to say. I mean, maybe her after we've already gone through. I can be like, hey, what do you think about this? So, do you have anybody that you kind of go to?
I kind of go to my mom,
Yeah.
which is kind of risky because a lot of the ideas are kind of like really, fucked up. But it's not so much. I mean, I love her opinion and I love to get her feedback on my ideas or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know family's family and they're always going to be supportive.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to be in that position of having the
Certainly. Yeah.
support, but it's more so I could just get my thoughts out there. And then
Yeah.
when she's like, wait, what? Like, why would this? And then like it comes back to me and I'm like, why have I been blown out again? I'm like, I have it now, like I have it figured out. So yep,
It does.
goodbye.
Yeah, it
And
does
that's
make a
it.
difference. Yeah, just to talk it out and talk it through, because just through those conversations, then you find again those jewels. Like, oh yeah, it's just that little simple thing. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've started to say something out loud and then immediately like, oh, there it is, whatever, and then you can go back and fix it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I totally, like I said with that earlier, like, somebody shot their first draft. I'm like, how can you not get feedback in some way? I mean, if you can get somebody to be insightful and honest, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? My goodness.
So being an actor, have you ever acted in a first draft script that
No.
you know of?
That I know of. No, I have not. My God, no. Can you? Oh, but but the thing is, it's like this feature I shot a couple of years ago. Um, it's called Space, directed by Monty Light. Let me plug that. Um, but I read the script ahead of time, so I knew kind of going in, and I wasn't scheduled to be in it. A
Yeah.
lot of things aligned that I was able to end up getting one of the roles, but I gave all my insights to my buddy Monty because we swap scripts pretty frequently. He's very insightful and very supportive, and I feel I'm the same to him. So we have that nice back and forth of honesty, but at the same time offering praise where it's warranted, because of course that's helpful. Um, but yeah, that wasn't a first draft. I don't know how many drafts he got through by the time we actually shot it, but I don't know. I'm curious now. Hey, well, how far were you along in this? I want to know.
I don't know. It's something I question because I'm not being an actor. I'm like, can they know bad writing from, good? I'm sure they can because they're the ones reading the lines. And there's a lot of stuff that doesn't sound, even as a writer, director, there's stuff where I'm like, that's a wonky
No,
dialogue I wrote.
you know
Fix
it.
it.
You know it when it's bad. And it's interesting because one of my strengths, at least I believe it is dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's that I'm able to make it organic and flow. But I've never, I mean, I guess there's been a couple times where I've had to say my own dialogue, but then I can just change it if I need to. That's not a thing. But dialogue is so tricky, and there's some writers that are great with story and structure and plot, but they're not good dialogue people.
Yeah.
It's so obvious to me. When you hear it or you see an actor struggling with it, it's like, well, clearly it's just not a well written line. They're not. I'm sure there's times when Meryl Streep is like, but of course she's who she is. She can say, change that line.
Yeah.
Can
you imagine being like the new writer and you're like, don't change my line to Meryl Streep?
God, you're fired, dude. Get out.
You're not walking back on set. You'll see this when it's done.
Oh man, yeah, no. But I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of being a writer director is that you have kind of that complete control. And it's a bummer to me, and this is certainly from film critic days. It's like you can see someone that is a powerful director, but not a good writer.
Yeah.
And that's always a bummer, but they are either told they can do everything or they think they can do everything. But everyone needs to know what their weaknesses are, because it's just going to make a shoddy product if you don't know where you need to fix or know what you aren't the best at. You could have a good idea, but I don't know how to write characters. Okay. Then hire people, that do it.
Collaborate, yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of I didn't know this, but so David Fincher's dad was a screenwriter. I had no idea about that, but that came out because of Mank coming out, which his dad wrote, which I had no idea either.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. And so he had an interview where he said, why would I write when I grew up in a house of writers? That's not my passion. My passion is to tell the story, and my focus is on the story. Are we telling the story?
Yeah.
He's like, writing is somebody else's job. I could tell you it's definitely not mine. That's such a fascinating, outlook. Like, he knows his, like you said, his strengths essentially.
Yeah. Well, you look like it's someone like M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
It's like you're a great director, but you're not necessarily the best writer. Your ideas are interesting, but I don't know if you always pull it off. Some of the time, yes. Like Signs, people have problems with the ending, whatever. It's one of my favorite films. I adore Signs because it scared the hell out of me. But, I can see where there might be, let's look at this in a different way. But it's always that wonder, is it because of who he is that people aren't going to say, boo?
No. Yeah.
It's like, I can't call him on this because I'll be fired. I don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy, whatever, but, just someone that, I always look at that as from the auteur position, like these people that do everything. I don't think there's a lot of people that can do it all, and so it's, again, I think it's a matter of understanding what you're good at and what you need help with.
Yeah.
And not everyone's willing to do that.
Well, I mean, it has me thinking though, because I'm like, I've never questioned what my weaknesses were, but it's good to reflect on that and to actually know where you stand, because you can always improve on that. Like, there's always room for improvement, which I think, like saying somebody's a bad writer or a bad director, it's like, yeah, you're not the best right now.
Yeah.
But give it a year or two, if you keep at it, circumstances can always change.
It's the same kind of scenario as an addict. You got to acknowledge what you can do and what you can't do before you improve. I mean, it's just common sense. If you think you're great and everything's perfect, well, then that's it. That's the end of the line. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like I'm feeling pretty solid in my writing after this amount of time. Like, certainly there's things I keep learning and will constantly keep learning, but as far as shooting something, I'm painfully aware of my shortcomings as far as I don't know anything about it. I know editing, I can understand it, but like I don't know lenses or I mean lighting. It's like that's just not in my. Let me hire a good DP. That's what I'm going to need. Um, but I understand that, and I know that that's something that I need to work on if I want to take that next step into doing something of my own,
Yeah.
which hopefully will happen soon.
Michael.
Oh man.
That's
But
exciting.
I think there's also this comfort zone thing.
Yeah.
I'm at home and I don't have to worry about anybody. I'm just gonna write. I don't have to answer to anybody. But then there comes that point. If you want to take that next step, it's like you're gonna have to answer to a lot of people, and people are gonna be asking you a lot. You need to know things.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. Like directing wise, I have a fear of visual effects actually. Of working with green screens, anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would have to have somebody by my side to make sure
Yeah.
we can actually get something in post because that's pre-planning, number one. And number two,
Certainly. Yeah.
I don't know how to edit that. Like, because I consider myself like an okay editor. Like I know the basics of it. And like I edited my short film and that was like 36 minutes long, right?
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
I think I'm okay in that area, but then I'm like, I have to be open to people actually more passionate about editing and like collaborate. Like, it's all about collaboration. Yeah. It's not always a one-man show,
Absolutely.
And so knowing that, I'm like, okay, well, could I push myself further? And actually, because like I try to write with stuff, I'm like, oh, could I shoot this? And like I have to stop being that mind. Like I have to just write a fucking story and then worry about if we could shoot that at another time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I kind of want to push myself to shoot a feature next. I'm like, if we shot 36 minutes, why not go for a feature next? Go big or go home.
Yeah.
Like, how could I challenge myself even more? And it's fear, I was telling you, I was afraid to do Zoom on the podcast, even like when the COVID hit.
But the point is that you're acknowledging the fear.
Yeah.
You know what it is. You know what you need to overcome. You're not pretending like it's someone else's fault. You know exactly what it is. It's just a matter of taking that step. I mean, this is I'll just make this announcement here. But I kind of what I said is like I this latest script that I just completed, I've decided I want to shoot it. And
fuck yes.
I don't know how, when, why, if, but I don't, and I'm not making the excuses, but I had a conversation with a friend, and she said, all you have to do is say yes. And that I'm like, you're right. I mean, one, I know a shit ton of people in this business that I can call upon for insights.
Yeah.
Potential collaboration, whatever it is. And so I said, you're right. You're right. So I said, yeah, because I have a specific vision for it. I understand what I want out of it. And based on the subject matter and kind of how it's portrayed, it's one of those films that will be a slow burn, which I know a lot of people don't like.
I love slow burns.
I do too. And if it's done right, it can be a beautiful thing. Mwah. But any producers that come in and bring in their insights, I know are going to want to change things up. And I'm like, I don't want that. Because one of the scripts I wrote last year, I'm actually collaborating, developing it with a filmmaker, a Canadian filmmaker, and there have been a lot of changes. And in my mind, if it's organic and it makes sense, I'll do it. And there's been some pretty large changes made, and I've done 3 drafts for this producer so far. And I was fine with it. I'm not worried about it, and hopefully it gets made, whatever. But this script, again, because it was so personal, I think that's why I'm like, I'm going to hold on to this for myself. And so yeah, basically I said yes. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know what I'm doing, but I have already started to reach out to a few people just for insights, potential interest. My buddy Monty, who I mentioned earlier, he said, find a location and get your DP. Those are the first 2 things you need to do. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I mean, stay tuned. Who knows? I'm not pushing full steam ahead. I'm just, like I said, putting out feelers and seeing what. But I totally agree in that way to look at the universe and say yes, and then things will start to fall into place as needed. The script's done.
Yeah.
It's and it's a very small cast. It's doable. There is a bit of a car chase in the climax. Spoiler alert, but otherwise it's a very small character piece. So it's doable.
Well, and like those big pieces are like when you're on set trying to figure out, how to shoot something essentially. And there's a lot of pre-planning that goes before, but like, I think that's also the fun of the process is like, we're going to shoot it. We're going to plan to shoot it, but we're not going to know if we got it until editing. Like,
oh my God, that's a terrifying concept to me. But I think
it's so exciting though.
I think I'm an over planner. Like the 2 short films that I shot many years ago, they were planned to death. Like I think out of fear, I'm like, there will be no contingency plans because it will not be needed. Which of course there were things that were being on the fly and whatever. But I think from that perspective, I'll prepare the hell out of it, And if I do find a DP, I have asked someone to read the script and see about potential interest already. But I know that, and I don't want to rely on that solely, but if you've got someone that understands it more, because as far as directing, I can direct actors. I'm not worried about that, and I can get the scene that I need.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of framing, lighting, what kind of lens? I don't know. A lens. Make sure it's clean. I don't know. But again, it's knowing those shortcomings and then surrounding yourself with people that can do and pick up the slack where you don't quite have the know-how,
Right.
And being not precious about that,
Yeah, well, and like not knowing how and like surrounding yourself kind of opens up the door of being like, now you kind of get a gist of it. You have more of an understanding, more of a foundation.
For the next time. Yep.
And that's how they got their start too. Like nobody knows camera work when they're born. Like
nobody does know it at all. I don't know. That stuff's daunting to me. I'm like,
but man, I think I'm excited for you. Do you feel like elated after saying yes? Like, do you feel like a huge weight's been kind of lifted off?
I've started to do a preliminary shot list. Again, I don't really know. I'm going to have to go back to all of my notes and books from these 2 shorts because I feel like I got what I needed out of that. The short's not perfect. It's, it was done for $2, but it's the same amount of planning. It doesn't matter how much you're spending. You still got to plan it out. And so I got to go back to those and start kind of looking at what gave me success there or what I perceive as success. And, just start figuring it out because my main thing, and this is what I said, and I think this is applicable to so many different things. How many things can you do on your own before someone else has to be involved? You can do a shit ton of work on planning for this feature film that, I'm going to do it. We're going to find a way. Like I said, you can start reaching out to people. You can start your shot list. You can start looking for locations. It doesn't involve any contracts, money, or, promising anybody anything. You can get all that done just by saying yes. And so that's kind of my mindset. It's like, what can I get done before I have to involve other people?
Yeah.
In a very direct way, Yeah.
Why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Michael, this is exciting, man. I'm happy for you.
Woo! Ooh, the vapors.
Like, is it hot in here?
Well, because I haven't announced it. I mean, the people that I've talked to, I'm like, whatever. It's not like it's a big secret, but it's like I don't know how to jimmy it forward, So that's why I've not really been like open about it. It doesn't matter, but and maybe it'll draw out excitement and support, and who knows. Anyway,
it will. It's like back in the day in the Pilgrims when they're like, oh, I'm going to go on this journey. Mountain Men. Let's look out Mountain Men. We're like, I have to cross like 5 different states on foot, for food for the winter. And people are like, well, we wish you well, Godspeed, right?
It's true.
When a filmmaker is like, I have a new project, it's that same thing. It's like, dude, Godspeed. It's going to be quite the journey. Like it's going to be fun, It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, because it's clearly a bucket list thing. And people have asked me numerous times, like you did earlier, it's like, do you want to direct? I'm like, absolutely. I mean, but it's again that same goddamn fear. But there's no reason. I mean, I've got enough background and again enough people that I know. It's not an insurmountable goal, So it again is just a matter of taking that step and saying, sure, I'm gonna do it. Why not? Because it is something I've always wanted to do, and don't and I see myself moving into that zone. But I think with a solid background in the writing is what I feel is like, then that's not something I have to think about as much. I can crank something out quick and obviously finesse it, but if I'm going to focus on the directing, I don't have to worry about the script. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you bring more to the table. You have that control of being like, change that dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. You actors, you suck. It's not the dialogue. All right, I'll change it.
But like they kind of, it's a nice transition to like this question I kind of like to ask near the end.
Yeah.
But what's one piece of advice that has stuck to you, and how do you apply it?
One technical thing that I have taken with me, I had a reading of one of my scripts maybe 5 years ago, and it stuck with me because I constantly use it now. And I had a development executive at the reading with all the actors and everything, and she was just there to give me insights, and she was a friend, and so she did. But it was so fascinating to me. We walked out, we were all saying our goodbyes, and she said to me, "You need to trim all your description." And I'm like, "But I'm telling a story. I need to be vivid and whatever." I now, any script since then, which I think there's been 6 scripts since then, I do the bare minimum. And if you need to describe it because it's a plot point, the roof of the building is orange because, well, that's going to be important laser because a plane's going to see it, whatever. But if it does not need to be there, and then get rid of it. And I have become obsessed with getting my page counts down. I go through it with a tiny little, like, if I can get rid of a line by getting rid of an A up in the top part, I will spend 10 minutes on one line of description to get down one line. That is not a joke, because I am so big on page count. So the 2 things she said to me, technically wise, she's like, don't do the work of the other artisans. When you are having a fight, if someone needs to break their arm, certainly you need to make that clear. But if they're just having a struggle, let the fight choreographer figure that out. That's their job. If they need to break their arm, they'll work that in. But I have now gotten down to, there is a struggle. And I write that constantly, because in horror films, there's always some kind of hand-to-hand fight. But I'm like, I always write, there's a struggle. Done. Not my problem. So that, and then she also said, don't over describe production design. That's their job. They'll figure that out. Again, if it's particular to the characters, then do it. And the other thing she said is, anything over 100 pages is a problem. I mean, unless you're writing an epic.
What?
And I have scripts over 100 pages, don't get me wrong. But she said there is something when you open up a script to read, and if it's 99 pages or less, it's doable. You could sit down and you could do it right then and there. If someone opens up, an executive or a manager or an agent opens up a script and they see 100 pages or 112 pages, dude, it is a task. And I have now taken that to heart. I try to get my scripts down to 99 or less because of her comment, because it makes sense to me. And now I'm going to put in a plug. I have a script consulting business, which I'll give you the link to. But me opening up other people's product, I have that same reaction now. If I see it's like 106, it's like, oh, Jesus, this is a chore. But if it's 99, it's some psychological thing, the 3 digits versus the 2 digits, it makes a difference. It seriously does. But I mean, who doesn't want a more clean cut script and rid of all the fat,
It saves money too. I mean,
exactly.
Less pages means more money saved.
Exactly. So anyway, but as far as like an overriding, what was the question again?
Oh, one piece of advice that stuck.
Well, that technically, but I mean, the other piece of advice is, I don't know. I guess I don't really have one like that's like kind of more philosophical. It's um, always that write what you know thing. I think is a good thing to go to. I mean, certainly to start with. I mean, everyone can research and do things, but like talking about these personal scripts, I'm digging up stuff that is personal to me, and then using that in a different way. So yeah, write what you know. You don't have to write it verbatim, but how can you use your experiences in other things? I think that's a valuable tool that is unique to you and is going to help kind of make your own voice unique, because this is not your experience, this is me. As long
Yeah.
as you can make it palatable and understandable to the wider audience.
Yeah. I think going off that, like writing what you know, I feel like there's something you don't know and Google can't answer it for whatever reason, right? Um, I learned this from Stephen King, like reading his thank you acknowledgments at the end of his books.
Yeah.
He, like in his latest books, especially, he's always worked with like the police force, and like he'll just call them and ask questions. And like, why can we not just call like a certain
Yeah.
place and ask a question?
It's
And just say that you're doing research for a writing project, like
yeah.
even if it's like super fucked up, like
Yeah.
just be like, hear me out, bear with me. I know this is
Bear
like
with me.
way out of left field, but hypothetically, if this happens, would you bleed out? Like I feel like I don't know, and like doing my job now because I have to call like places and stuff and get more information. I'm being vague on purpose, but
No, of course.
I feel like doing that at first I was afraid of like talking on the phones. I'm like, I don't want to talk to like all these places, like I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to do that. But now it's like second nature to me. And like I answer my phone now, like, this is so this is Chaz. Thanks. Like, how can I help you? And I'm like, wait, it's my personal phone. Like I get out of that work thing. But
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, why can we not?
Well, it's interesting. This mom died that I mentioned earlier. When I was writing that, there is a funeral director as one of the central characters. So I have in my history a woman that's from my hometown. She actually was the funeral director that oversaw my stepdad's funeral. And so I texted her. I'm like, hey, I need insights into how this would work and what is this called and blah blah blah. So she's like, just call me. So we had like I think a half-hour conversation because the character's based on her anyway. But I got all these wonderful insights about the funeral business, and yeah, it's great to be able to pick up the phone and just like, because I had a list of questions. I need to know what this is and how does this work and blah. So and it was great. And that just, I mean, that's not necessarily going to come through to your average layman audience member. But my thought is always, if you can make yourself believe it, then you can sell it to the audience. They might not, oh God, I'm trying to think of the example. Like, this other script I mentioned earlier, it takes place in a retail store because, of course, that was where I was at the time. And I use the term cash wrap, which I don't know if you know what that is. That's where the registers are and where you wrap things up. It's called the cash wrap, which, when I'm working there, that's just the cash wrap. And it was interesting to me because I think there was actual dialogue that said, go to the cash wrap. And so I think my editor, she's like, why? No one knows what that is. I'm like, but in context, they'll understand what it is. And certainly if they see the character go there. So there's certain things I don't buy into. Like, for instance, like Interstellar, which I adore. I love that film. I don't know anything about, interdimensional travel and time. It's like, but you've made me understand it enough that I can get through and understand the plot and the characters' motivations. That's the point. As long as you can explain it, I'm not going to have a technical conversation in the script about a cash wrap. But, it's that kind of thing. And I think that's our job as writers. It's like, you want just enough of the technical jargon, the same with this, funeral director that I talked to, that people will just buy it. Okay, that's just how it is. I don't necessarily know what a church truck is, which is the little funeral thing where they put the casket on, the kind of bendy thing, accordion looking thing that they spread out and put the casket on. She said it's a church truck. I'm like, how in God's name would I ever know what a church truck is? But those, and it's in the script, church truck. But I'm not going to take 3 hours of exposition. Okay, folks, here's what a church truck is. You just got to gather that this is a funeral thing, moving on.
Yeah,
but it also makes it more authentic.
Yeah. I thought for a second there, I thought you were going to talk shit on Interstellar, and I was like,
oh no, dude, no,
dude. You're going to hurt my heart, man.
Oh, I love that movie. Oh my God. It makes me cry every single time.
Yes, it's funny going on Facebook now because it came out around this time, like 6 years ago, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fourth time, fifth time, and I'm like, oh, what it was like watching IMAX, like going there after work.
Oh, I love that film. No, just a quick side note. I wrote my top 40 favorite films of all time on my blog like 7 years ago. I need to readjust, and I've decided, you know what, I'm going to take on the top 100. I'm going to see if I can actually make that real. And Interstellar is going to move into the top 40. Like, it's become this kind of shining movie for me. I adore it. So, yeah.
Now, what about Arrival?
I loved Arrival, but I didn't love it when I first saw it.
What? Ooh, why?
I don't remember even what my reaction was, but I wasn't wowed by it. I liked it. The performances are great. I'm like, holy crap, this is crazy. But I didn't walk out of there like. But now in subsequent viewings, I'm like, wow, But again, like we talked about earlier, did I, eat a burrito that morning? So my stomach was a little, who knows?
Yeah.
But it didn't quite hit the way I would have hoped it did, even though I like it a lot now.
I think Arrival and Interstellar are great double features. They're both emotional. I always
wanted to do that, Interstellar, Contact,
Space Odyssey,
Gravity. There's one other one that I'm like, God, these are all The Martian. Like, what would you put them in order? What order would you put them in? I mean, obviously Contact would be first, and I think Interstellar would be last as far as progression of time. Anyway,
no,
these are the things that movie nerds talk about, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, did you watch Ad Astra?
Yeah, I didn't care for. I saw it during quarantine, so just recently. It was fine.
Yeah, I know there's like a lot of mixed response to it, which I get because it's not what I expected going in either. But I find that movie like really reflective as well because like it's his voiceover,
Yeah.
And I'm like, the whole third act, I'm like, how much time actually passed? Like, did he actually go see his dad? Like,
right. I didn't dislike it. It's been a few months, so I don't remember the details, but I didn't walk out of it going. I mean, I was like, okay, I enjoyed it. I think those are those films that you enjoy it, but then 5 minutes later, okay, I've forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sci-fi is hard to pull off. I think sci-fi.
I just saw 2001 for the first time 2 years ago. Talk about holes in my film education. Yeah. I just saw Godfather 1 and 2 for the first time last year.
Hey, actually, just have that laying around out of nowhere.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. But yeah, 2001. But of course, my mind was blown. I'm like, but again, I saw it. I really believe you see things when you're supposed to.
Yeah.
If I had seen it as a 16-year-old, would I have had the same depth of
reaction to it,
enjoyment or whatever? I think there are things there to be said for seeing it at a certain time in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I saw The Ring when that came out. Dude, I was like in third grade again.
Stop it.
But to this day, that movie still terrifies me just because based off my experience then, And after that, we watched Scary Movie 3, which makes fun of it. And so it just, I don't know. I think Scary Movie 3 is probably the strongest scary movie of all of them. Next to like the first one.
I don't know if I've seen past 2.
You should check out 3. 4 and 5 are awful. 3 is pretty fun.
I think that's what's fascinating about movies, though, is the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
There are tons of movies, because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, that I loved as a child, and I can look at them now and objectively be like, God, this is just crap. But damn, I still love it, and of course it is that memory factor, and so it's a matter of how can you separate your love as a child from us being in this business as film critics and filmmakers of it's really poorly made. But I love it. Yeah.
Well, it's like I'm for whatever reason I am rewatching Fast and the Furious. I've only seen up to 4. Honestly, I haven't even seen Tokyo Drift, and I actually was going to watch Tokyo Drift last night, but I decided to skip it because I just hear it has nothing to do with the main storyline.
Yeah,
I'm like, I want to watch this main storyline, and the first one's kind of fun just because it's like early 2000s techno music, like BT did the score for it, and but it's funny that you're bringing up like the details of the dialogue, like. If you could make it believable, nobody's going to question it. And like these guys are talking about car engines. I don't know anything about cars. I'm just like, oh yeah, totally. Like,
totally. Yeah.
I'm not going to question it.
Despite the film being what it is, but if they manage to do that and just gloss over technical things that maybe most people like, are just okay, I buy it,
Yep.
But it's also in the delivery by the actors. Are they selling it? Do they know what it is? Because if they know what it is, then okay, I trust it,
Yeah, they're talking like, oh, this is the engine that NOS goes into or whatever. I'm like, okay,
Sure.
I'm not going to question that at all.
All right. Okay,
So,
sure.
by the way, those movies, I watched the fourth one last night, and I was just like,
I think I've seen one of them. I don't even know, man. I've not seen certainly more than two of them, if that. I don't even know.
well, the one and two and five are on HBO Max. So
Okay.
I watched those two.
There was one I saw. I think it was one that was shot in Puerto Rico. That because we watched that because my husband's from Puerto Rico, so I think that's why we're like, let's watch this. I think it's five.
I think that's five. Everybody says five.
That really big, really long bridge.
I don't know. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, well, maybe that's the one.
But I know Puerto Rico's five because I was talking with the guest last night, and he said five, Puerto Rico, and that's actually where he met his wife.
Oh, fine. Yeah.
So that's how that got brought up. But yeah, so it's just interesting watching those. But the first one's nostalgic, and the rest is just like you've
whatever.
They didn't transform. I like the first Transformers, but then again, I was 7 when I saw that, or not 7. I was like in 7th grade when that came out.
I didn't like that first film. We saw it in the theater. We were back back home on a trip to see family, and like, oh, let's go see Transformers. And that was it, because it's one of those I will never bother with any more of your films. It's like of this franchise, because you didn't do enough for me on this one.
Yeah, and now they've gone to like the Crusades. I'm just like, how do you go from like robots to the Crusade? Okay, I won't question. Sure. Same thing with Fast and Furious though. Like, how do you go from stolen DVD players to fighting terrorists and saving the world? Now you're going to go to space apparently in your next film.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh wow.
I think that was on Deadline.
Well, I mean, Jason went to space and Jason X, so they made it work.
Oh, that's such a fun, campy, bad movie.
No, we watch a Friday the 13th every Friday the 13th because it's kind of a high holy day for us horror fans, So yeah. We always I have my specific favorites in the franchise, and so Elwood, my husband, he's like, let's watch something that's not your favorites. Let's revisit Jason X, and I'm like, and it was one of those like, geez, this is painful. It's so bad. Like and you're talking about dialogue and I mean, I guess coming as being a writer, and dialogue again is one of my strengths, and character development is what I consider my other strength. So when I don't see character development, it hurts. I'm like, give me something, anything. Because none of those characters, I had nothing. I'm like, I don't know who you are, even slightly. You're just a body.
You're like die.
Yeah.
Just die. Do what you're gonna do.
Just give me something. Give me something.
Did you play
Tick?
Did you play the video game?
No. Is it good? Because I know you can play all the different Jasons, right?
Yeah, so I got the beta when it was first released. Like, it was like the hype, and like all the servers were down, and people were like, "What the fuck?" I paid $13 for this. The server should work. And I had no idea how it worked. Like, nobody knew how like it played. It was just like one of those Kickstarter stuff, you know. And finally, when I got onto a game, I was Jason. Like, it just chooses randomly who's Jason. You don't get to pick.
Oh my god! Okay.
And I was like, I'm Jason, I guess. But then I started laughing because if I wasn't Jason, like, he's around you when the music starts, like the and the Jason's usually quiet in the movies. He doesn't talk at all, period. Yeah. And then in the game, whoever's Jason's like, knock, knock, bitch. And they like break down the door. And just adds like this whole new excitement. We're like, fuck. Like, it's so fun, I had fun playing it for like at the time. I haven't played it in like couple years. But
this is the level of my video game experience. The last time I actually played something regularly was when I had the original Sony PlayStation, and I was playing the Resident Evil games, the originals. That's how long ago. I mean, that's a long time ago.
Dude,
I'm not a video game guy. I never really have been, except for the Resident Evil games. Those took me, of course, zombies. I'm like, of course, I got to do this,
So how do you feel about the movies?
I think I've only seen 3 of them, and they're dumb fun. I'm like, but they're rebooting, and I guess they're going to be truer to the games, which would make me intrigued to see them again. But yeah, they're fun. They're dumb fun. Whatever.
I feel like video games deserve more of like a TV adaptation, essentially. Like I know The Last of Us, they're adapting that
Right.
on HBO, which I think will better suit it in the end.
Well, I mean, because it's such a long journey as you're playing games like that, so there's room to do that in an 8 episode limited series.
Yeah, well, and games are very character driven too. It's not so much about the plot. I mean, like it's all about who you're playing. Like RPGs, especially, it's about the role of your character and whatever. And so, like with The Last of Us, or if they even did that with like Red Dead Redemption, like I'm like, if they
Right.
did that to a movie, I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's
That's
too
a
much.
TV show. That's a
Yeah.
TV show to its core. You could get like a 3 or 4 seasons out of that. Like, what are you doing trying to mesh 4 seasons into like a 2-hour thing? But
Well, on that topic, do you have any of your scripts that would be better suited as a series?
that's a feature already, or
Yeah.
there's one that could be better as like a series. I did it as a feature just, to have a spec script, but the more I think about it, I'm like, if I ever retouch this, I definitely go the series, especially because like, have you seen the Netflix show Love?
Which one?
Love?
No.
It's one that Judd Apatow was producing and doing stuff on, but that's a very character driven show too. And that's exactly what that script is kind of centered around, was like these 2 characters on opposite ends, like the show. And I'm like, this would definitely fit better as a TV show. So, and there's been ones where I've started as a feature and then I reach page 40. I'm like, that's the end of episode 1. Like out of nowhere, I'm like, I guess this is an episode, not a not a feature, as I would hope. So
That's daunting. I have my original script that the first feature I ever wrote. Like it would make an ideal 8 part limited series, and that's the intention. But it's a matter of finding the time and motivation to revisit it.
Yeah.
Because it's a script from 16 years ago. How clunky is it going to be? And it's my first. So do I want to look at that? It's a good idea, but I don't think it's probably well written. But I think it'd be a nice 8-part. Yeah.
I like 8 parts. And have you seen Queen's Gambit on Netflix?
No, that's probably next on our list. We just binged over the last 10 days. We just binged all 4 seasons of The Crown.
I have yet to see The Crown. That's on my list.
Worth it. Worth it.
That's what I hear. But the guy who did Queen's Gambit, he also did Godless, which was like another Netflix miniseries set in the West. And I don't actually remember watching it until like I saw the name. And I'm like, oh, I did watch that. I actually kind of liked it, And then comparing that to Queen's Gambit, I'm like, oh yeah, he has like a similar style. Oh yeah, I can kind of see it now. So.
Well, it's on our list, but it's like I've heard a lot of different things. People are like, it's great, and then I've heard people like, I don't get it. I'm like, all right, so it has to be one of those you go in and watch yourself to really know whether it's. Yeah.
No, people didn't like it.
Yeah. Like, what's all the fuss? I don't get it. That's what I heard a couple people write, or saw people write. So
I think it's just compelling. It's more character driven for sure. It's not.
Well, I love Anya Taylor-Joy. I mean, I've loved her since The Witch, so I love the trajectory her career is taking. It's
a matter of time before she gets her Oscars.
Oh hell yeah, she's so good, and she's just such an interesting look, physically. But yeah, ever since The Witch, I'm like, okay, you're going places.
Yeah, The Witch, and then my second project I saw her in was Split, actually with M. Nights.
Yeah.
And I'm like, horror film. She's in the horror films, and now she's doing all these drama. Like she did Emma, which is based off like a Jane Austen.
Yep.
She's well across the board now.
Well versed.
Yeah.
In the genres.
So it's only a matter of time before she gets that little Oscar, and I will be there. Fuck yeah.
cheering you on.
From the beginning, I was a fan. So, all right, Michael, where can people find you at?
My personal website, which has all my screenwriting acting stuff, is notmymess.com. And my screenwriting business, it's called Klugula Screenplay Consulting, and it's klugulascreenplayconsulting.com. And I work on features and shorts. And then I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and every other place because I don't live anywhere but on social media. It's kind of sad, but that's the truth.
I feel that. I feel that hard. If I'm not scrolling through social media, I'm like, I could be writing. Then if I am scrolling through social media, I'm like, I could be writing.
Yeah. It's a never ending. Oh, I did 6 pages. Let me get on social media for 4 hours. Yeah.
Yep. Or it's like, oh, I'm going to check Twitter real quick just to see what's going on. And then 4 hours later, it's like, oh, this is 4 hours. I could have wrote like one paragraph.
I didn't get any pages in. Yeah. So, it's a rabbit hole for sure.
All that stuff will be in the show notes. Follow the podcast on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and Michael, thank you for coming on. It was nice meeting you over
you
Zoom.
As well. This was a blast. Thank you.
Of course, and we will stay in touch, I presume. So
yeah, sure.
Fuck yeah, man.
Fuck yeah, man.
All right, Michael. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.